Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to be with you again. Hope you and yours are well. Been a week since we last had a wee chat. What a hell of a week it's been. So much to talk about, so much going on, some big stuff. And some of the media, or mainstream media, and some of our elected politicians don't want to talk about it, but we do. And we think you do too, so we all. So let's get the crew in right away. Our favourite lady down in the borders, it's our Yvonne.
Hi there,
How
Roddy.
you doing?
How you
I'm good. How about you?
Well, cold. It's been a really bro day today. Is it bro? Anyway,
No,
it's
bro's
been
not good.
freezing.
I wouldn't say it's
So,
cold, but I hear that there was a pondbreaker signs coming, falling down everywhere. But yeah, it's cold here as well. It's down to 32 degrees. I'm shivering. And over there in North Dakota, over there, well, I don't think he's in North Dakota, but he's somewhere in North America. It's our Phil.
Yep, howdy still, next door state over in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, where Prince was hanging out. Try to go and see Paisley Park and hang about Prince's kind of labyrinth where he used to make all his music and do all these performances just down the road here in Chaska, just the southwest of Minneapolis. Cracking spot, cracking, really nice.
Good. And so it's a happy Thanksgiving sort of stuff, I suppose.
Yeah.
I had someone ask me, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? What? Next question. And up there in Clickmanchester, the favourite lawyer, it's our Eva.
Hiya, Roddy. How are you?
I'm fighting fit. Great. Well, this definitely as a lawyer, you're going to be busy tonight, I think, Eva. We've got lots to ask you. We need lots of information. We'll be coming to that. Great to see you.
Aye.
Good.
And not forgetting this, we're talking about the weather. I mean, you can't talk about the weather and not bring in our resident weatherman from Aldrickie. It's our Lloyd.
How you doing? That'll cost you £1.
I'm doing fine. Good to see you. How about yourself?
Aye, over the COVID, but what a week.
Absolutely. And let's, because some of our viewers are wanting more, and probably less introductions and more actually the talk, and maybe that's what we should do. So let's not hang about. Phil, if I could start with you. There's some real big stories this week, but I'd really like to start with one of the biggest, if not the biggest, which of course is Grangemouth and its threatened closure. And it has been noted by many that while it was, the National put out a headline on it, the mainstream media really haven't done much with this. Our elected officials, I mean, it wasn't even brought up at First Minister's questions. But we're going to bring it up. It's a tragedy that a nation with as much oil and gas as us could possibly end up with no refinery.
Yep. Yeah, it's appalling. It's the closure of Grangemouth raises some very big questions indeed, not least of which are why do you need an oil refinery? What are the economics of not having one, along with steel making and the like? And why this one? Given there's 6 oil refineries in the UK, 5 major, 1 minor, and I've worked in a few of them, and only one in Scotland, where 96.5% of the oil exists in Scottish waters. So, I mean, you could go through them. There's the Phillips 66 in Humber, which I worked on, 11.5 million tonnes it produces a year. Prax, next door to it in North Killingholme, 11 million. Then there's a Petroenius, which currently does 10 million tonnes per year. SR in Stanlow, 12 million. Valero in Pembroke in Wales, 10.5 million. And then the Folly one at 16 million, ExxonMobil one. There's a smaller one in Harwich, but that doesn't really count much. But what needs to be understood is that for a country to succeed, and this is about the deconstruction of Scotland as a potential nation, as a nation, we shouldn't be played. You can't be. Your economy needs to be as robust and strong as possible. If you look at how the tiger economies were choked because they couldn't produce enough steel, energy and raw materials. So without power to control such resources and facilities, you can easily be manipulated by the markets, the world markets. So it needs to be as independent. Scotland needs to be as independent of the world markets for key resources and facilities and energy as it possibly can. So we need our own power generation. We need steel manufacturing, we need facilities, we need access to raw materials, finance, educated workforce, etc. So if Scotland wants to truly fly as an independent nation, it needs its own refinery. Now, all investors currently forecast that I'm aware of are still showing 50 to 60 years of continued growth in demand for energy. And that means fossil fuels. It's not disappearing any time. Unless you do a France and build enough nuclear, you carry 78% of your base load or indeed peak demand, then you've got to continue to rely on fossil fuels. This is not going away anytime soon. Now, I specialise in upstream, which is exploration and extraction, but I've done some downstream. I've worked in some of these refineries, and it's a margins business. That's what people need to understand. Profits are derived from the spread between the input cost of crude oil and the price of the outputs like petrol, diesel, jet fuel, cooking gas, heavy fuel oil, asphalt, lubricants, feedstocks, plastics, you know, and the other uses of oil. And most people have got no idea that the uses of oil beyond fuel, it's only about 45% of oil that's used for petrol, for transportation. You know, so, and the other thing that we need to know, this is a privately owned facility, and the owners are just not prepared to invest to retain it at Grangemouth. It's about profit and nothing else. Were it nationalised, it would be a different story. And here's why. I worked at Phillips 66 refinery at Killingholme, okay, and it's one of the most modern. It's a smaller, compact refinery, but Grangemouth is an old one. Yes, it has been updated, but I worked in one of the most advanced ones, and this facility has more advanced processing equipment that makes large quantities of coke. Not the stuff you can maybe buy down your local disco, but the actual the production of coke. Critically, it can handle like a great variety of blends of oils. And that's important given how the market works. Often ships sail out without a buyer, fully laden, and the oil cargo is sold in transit to the main markets around the world. So if your refinery can handle a wider breadth of blends like they can at Killingholme in the Humber Estuary, then you're open to a much larger marketplace, and you can produce and process more efficiently, which obviously helps you with your operations and profitability. So an independent Scotland should take Grangemouth, rebuild it as the most modern, efficient refinery in the UK. So when we take our country back and we take our oil back, we control the UK energy markets. It's really not rocket science, guys.
Thanks for that, Phil. Yvonne, a few 6 weeks ago, you put me in touch with Umar in Nigeria. And part of the conversation I had with him was he was saying that Nigeria was such a colonized nation that they had this massive bounty of oil. But at one point, they didn't even have an oil refinery. It all went to France to be refined. And here we are in Scotland, as Phil's pointed out, with a huge bounty in our 96% of all the oil produced in the North Sea. There's a load of refineries in England that are going to stay open. This is just classical colonization.
Well, I've been looking into who owns what. I mean, they say it's Chinese owned, but there's a big wedge of it that's owned by some bloke in Monaco, Sir James Ratcliffe, some billionaire playboy, who's looking to buy 25% of the Manchester United shares. And if anybody's wondering where he's going to get the money from, well, it could be this deal, which is, you know, Phil's right. These industries need to be owned, nationalized. We can't leave the fate of 500 good people. That's how many's employed there. We can't leave 500 people at the mercy of some Monaco-based British billionaire. It's obscene. And, you know, this again, the sooner we get independence, the better. This whole community is going to be devastated. And I saw it up close what happens when the biggest employer goes. And I saw it happen in concert.
Mm-hmm.
And all you get are these cheap jobs coming in to replace the existing jobs. And it's terrible. And if you don't have an oil refinery in your backyard, you're not a serious player in the oil industry. I remember when there were half in Sudan, and the country was being divided, and there was a big argument over who gets the country's oil refinery, because you can have all that oil, but it's of no use. The big money comes from the refinery part.
Yeah, that's the refined products, yeah.
You know, the Scottish people are being played once again by the Westminster Tories, who just see us as a money tree somewhere that can just come up and loot our oil, in this case, our oil refinery. And what amazed me about this was the lack of response from the SNP government. It was as though somebody's little corner shop was closing its doors for the last time. You know, there was hardly a response from the Scottish government. And of course, Air Miles Angus has seen this as an opportunity to fly off to Beijing and try and persuade the other owners, the Chinese Petronas, I think it is, to reconsider. And the political response has been woeful. Even, you know, from the Tories, they seem to have just picked up on the seriousness of it all when Alex Salmond raised the issue and said, "This is, you know, this is really serious." And it 500 jobs for Christmas, awful.
Yep, it is terrible. I mean, that's the thing, Lloyd. Everyone's touched on it. The lack of response. I mean, we sat back over my lifetime. We had the greatest shipyards in the world, and they closed. And we didn't do much. Our steel's gone, and our coal's gone, and our railways are gone. And at Springburn, we used to produce all these railway engines, etc. Gone. This looks like, unless we mobilise, another great industry is going. We cannot be a major oil producer without a refinery, surely. And surely the response of our government in both Westminster and in Edinburgh should be full shoulder to the wheel.
I think it's in Westminster's interests for Grangemouth to close. That's the way I would see it. But the most shocking part of this for me is the failure to understand by the Scottish National Party government that this is a strategic asset, an absolutely central strategic asset to this country. And if your vision and your goal in the future is the achievement of national independence, then you would, under no circumstances, accept the closure of a major strategic industry whose influence runs right into the engineering schools in our universities. It's about skill, it's about high quality jobs, it's about the opportunity to develop for the future. Now, I was particularly disappointed by Neil Gray's statement that they had been in talks with INEOS, and then he gave us the INEOS line. And that line is, Grangemouth is no longer sustainable. And they're now seeking to find a way to make it sustainable. Now, what that says to me is that Neil Gray bought the story. He bought Jim Radcliffe's story, which proves, a thing I've said many times, there is no strategic thinking in the current leadership of the Scottish National Party, and most especially no strategic thinking at the Scottish Government. Now, this is not about 300 jobs in Grangemouth. This is about, as I said, a strategic asset for the country and the nation. This is about something that's effect into the supply chain and indeed into our education structures. Is essential, absolutely essential for us to grow and develop as an independent country. What's horrible and particularly disgusting about this is the SNP seem to have taken on the idea that this is just about replacing 300 jobs, that it's not about losing a major strategic asset. This shows an absolute paucity of thinking. I mean, I remember when I was in Parliament, Grangemouth was closed down by a driver's strike. This caused ructions in the pound. This caused ructions in the price of Brent crude. It had a serious effect on the UK economy. And everything was done to rapidly deal with that situation. Now, that was only the drivers and the truckers accessing Grangemouth. This wasn't about shutting the whole place. The other thing that comes into play here, Roddy, and it's worrying. The Forth is being designated a green freeport. Is maybe part of that green freeport the absolute closure of Grangemouth and the landing of oil and gas at that strategic section? Or is this about making sure that the green freeport that is created in the Forth will never be genuinely viable in real terms? But what is deeply, deeply worrying about this is the SNP are hiding behind the green concept, still claiming, with no true evidence, that we need to get rid of all our oil. It's an absurdity. But it shows, again, the paucity of thinking in the Scottish National Party government, and something has to change. This is much, much bigger than simply 300 jobs. It's an assault on the economy of this country, and it's an assault on our future independence.
It is indeed. And the other one, even not the politicians are not saying much, the media aren't saying much, but what's really disgusting me, it seems to me the trade unions are sort of treating it as nothing really sort of specific or anything important. We need our trade unions to step up as well.
I think it's Kenny McCaskill who's stressed in the last year or two that the real opposition, certainly in Westminster, are the unions. It's not the opposition politicians, and a similar position has applied in Scotland. So it's disappointing that thus far the unions have been pretty quiet. But you've noticed I've been sitting, paying attention, close attention to what everybody else has said tonight so far. And you all know a bit of the bigger picture that I don't know. And I tend to reduce events such as this threat to Grangemouth to partly personal experience or to what I anticipate to be the experiences of individuals that I either know or I imagine I know. So I'm a child of the 60s. My dad left the caravan site we lived on in Crieff to travel to Stirling, from then to Edinburgh, down to London to get a flight to France, and then another one to Algeria to help to build the pipeline across the Sahara Desert when I was only, 3-4 years old. He worked there for a couple of years and he came back enthused with what that pipeline was going to do for the people in North Africa. And I learned over the course of the past few years from very many people I've encountered, particularly on Twitter, that there were numerous men in a similar position to my dad who went round the world, just as Phil does now, working on oil and on similar projects. And how pitiful it is that our fathers have done that work internationally, and yet at home we're going to allow ourselves to be stymied. Again, I remember in the 60s when Scottish oil was discovered, and I remember that self-same caravan site and men and women like my mum and dad belting out on Hogmanay, Flower of Scotland, because they truly believed that the discovery of oil was going to transform their lives. But these people have said it before, and I'll say it again and again and again. They did not see the Stetsons that were seen elsewhere in the world, and there were no diamonds for them and no fancy Dallas-type homes. Instead, those people from the 60s and the 70s in Scotland remained absolutely betrayed by unionist governments and over again by Labour and the Feeble 50. It cannot be right that the current SNP government, who were elected to achieve our independence, will also betray the sons and the daughters of those folk who have been betrayed already. The Scottish Government has got to make a stand, like Alex Salmond did twice by securing the future of Grangemouth when he was in power, because in the absence of such a stand, Scotland will become the desert that other deserts were before they discovered oil and became prosperous. You know, we have people in the Allied, Ian Cameron is one of them, who's travelled to the Middle East and helped them to build the infrastructure there that oil has bought and paid for. People like that should not now be living in a country which sees itself being asset stripped and reduced to practically a rubble economically, as our leaders stand idly by, twiddling their thumbs, and as Lloyd says, buying into a bogus line. There won't be 400 or 500 jobs lost in Grangemouth. There will be 4 or 5 times that loss if Grangemouth is allowed to cease as a refinery. Not only will there be jobs and livelihoods lost, lives will be lost. People will lose their homes. They will fall into arrears with their mortgages. Marriages will be broken. People will suffer depression. People will die as the result of this. It is such a phenomenal event. It must be prevented, because we do not need the proclaimers writing yet another chorus about some other inevitable losses to Scotland, when losses such as this ought not to occur, and would not occur if we were led by the leaders that our people deserve, not those we're landed with now, who have neither the spine nor the political guile, ambition or vision to do their job. Were we independent, Grangemouth would remain open as long as the people of Scotland need it. As it is, the green tail wagging the yellow dog is why there is antipathy towards the oil industry in this country. Hell mend them if they don't get their acts together, because this is one betrayal the people of Scotland will never forget.
No, you're quite right. I'm sitting here, as you know, in Dubai, who have less oil than Scotland has in its water. And if I look outside, you know, it's got Dubai's got the largest building in the world, the biggest hotel in the world, the best 5-lane motorways everywhere. It's absolute opulence. And then I look at Aberdeen, the European capital for oil, and I look at Scotland, and I look at the poverty that's there. It is disgraceful. And it is not, folks, when you're watching, it's not inevitable. It shouldn't be happening. And it can be changed and it can be reversed, but we need to do something about it. But I tell you what, as far as I'm concerned, the SNP are not the people to do it. They haven't got the will or the gumption to do anything about it. And their time has come and gone, and we've got to get rid of them and we've got to replace them. But that's another story for another day. I want to move on a wee bit, because what else has been happening? What about opposition MPs, our great British unionists who love Britain so much? What have they been up to? Techie, can you stick up Jackson Carlaw's big tweet of the week? When this has all been going on, Grangemouth's in danger. He's going on about bloody ferries. But read the words, folks. He says 6 years ago today, Humza Yousaf and Nicola Sturgeon proudly launched a ferry without an engine and with painted on windows. So a quick question for the President and former First Ministers: how many passengers has the Queen's served? If that wasn't disgraceful enough, Techie, can you stick up beside it Douglas Alexander of the Labour Party? His big tweet: oh, help my Bob. It's the exact same word for bloody word, which he's printed out as well. They're in cahoots. You vote blue Tory, you get red Tory. You vote red Tory, you get blue Tory. Phil, you couldn't put a credit card between the shucks or arse. You'd have the same party.
Oh, absolutely. As we've been saying all along, this is the deconstruction of British politics and reconstructing it in the form of American politics, where there is no difference between the red and the blue Tories. I mean, the Labour have now abandoned their role as the Workers' Party, and they and the Tories are now embracing this American system of only two parties with almost identical policies. Pro-business, which I'm also supporting of, but for me, not to the cost or the detriment of the people. If we adopt more socialist government policies and allow government to provide education, health, more in the housing market, public transport like rail nationalise, etc., then labour costs become less expensive to hire, and our businesses become instantly much more competitive. That's what we should be looking at. That's what socialism was designed to do, and that's what Labour used to do. Now there's no difference. And let's not conflate socialism, as is often the case, with the idiocy of radical communism. You know, what we need here is pragmatism. And we're not getting it from these people. This is simple point scoring. It's across, and that applies to the same, the school meals. You know, the school meals issue with children. They can find money for war and Trident and HS2
Oh yeah,
or H2.
hang on, we're there, Phil, because we do have. Well, you're on that. We've got that. Jackie, can you stick up Rachel Reeves and her being interviewed, which is telling us there's no money for school meals?
What's your opinion on free school meals for children?
Look, again, it's one of those things that I just can't see where the money's going to come from.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I mean, this is pointing out the Labour Party Scottish candidate. You know, and the Tories are exactly the same, and they've got exactly the same policies, and we will be subject to this imposition if we don't get our act together and get ourselves the hell out of this disintegrating UK. It's going down the tubes rapid style, and if we don't get off this bus, we're in the same car crash as the rest of the UK.
Absolutely. That's as I say, people have been thinking, we'll get rid of the Tories, Yvonne, and, you know, bring in the other lot. But you just heard Rachel Reeves there. There's no money. She can't see where the money's coming from to give hungry school kids, or all school kids in England and Wales, a free lunch. But I tell you what, they can find money for HS2. They can find money for Trident nuclear missiles. They can find money to arm Ukraine. They can find money to arm Israel. But they can't find the money to feed the kids. Why would you want to get rid of one set of Tories and bring in another set?
Well, exactly. You know, I remember when Labour used to be the party of welfare. Now it's the party of warfare. They're all looking the other way as the babies in Gaza have been dying in their thousands, and they've given unconditional support to Israel. And of course, the Tories are no better because they've been bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby, Friends of Israel, employed by the Israeli embassy in London with money from Tel Aviv. Anybody who touches them is tainted with the filth that is Zionism. And it really, you know, looking at those tweets, I don't know whose tweet it was, Carl or Jackson's or Alexander, but it's, well, it just shows they have the one mindset, and they obviously all pee in the same pot. You know, they've got no imagination, no difference, nothing at all. And anybody who contemplates voting for either Labour or the Tories, what the hell? Think of the babies in Gaza. Rachel Reeves would be able to find money to bomb Gaza, I bet, easily. If she gets into power, she'll find the money then to send weapons from Britain to Israel to use on helpless civilian populations. You know, they're a disgusting set of politicians, and I don't think she would be any better than Kwasi Kwarteng either. I don't think she's going to inspire or have people running to invest in Britain if she takes over in number 11. She's like a wrecking ball, little woman.
Absolutely, they're all they're just the same, Lloyd. Every one of them. And it's another clip another heading I want to put in a minute, because they will, as we say, they'll not find the money for Grangemouth, but they'll find money for their pet projects and down south or weaponry or whatever. But the candidates, we bemoan the people that we've got in power at the moment, but let's look at one of the ones that Labour's putting up. Techie, can you put up a famous Labour candidate and their quotes of why she doesn't trust a Scots person? because she's an Irish Catholic, but she supports the British state. Can you stick it up for us? There we go. Laura McConnell. She doesn't trust the Scots. She goes on about how she's a good Irish Catholic descent and she wants to support the British Union. Now, Lloyd, I have never been able to get my head round. I can understand, everyone knows my football allegiance. I can understand these half-wits that go under Rule Britannia. At least you can, there's a logic, there's a link there. But the people who say, oh, I'm a good Irish Catholic, I support the Brits, but not my own nation. Explain that one to me, Lloyd.
It's not possible to explain it unless you're in the Labour Party, where there's this bizarre relationship between supposedly committed people of a Irish Catholic background who share exactly the same council chambers and indeed the same monthly party meetings with members of the Orange Order and the Black Preceptory. Labour has always played this silly game. I actually laughed when I saw this, because when I first joined the Scottish National Party, it was fairly regular, dependent on what area you were in, that either the Labour Party or the Conservatives would put leaflets, and I've actually got one somewhere that I kept from way back then. They used to put leaflets through doors that said, "Home rule is Rome rule." Right?
Yep.
Now, it was both the Labour Party and the Tories did that. Now, I can't remember the other one because we didn't really see many of them in Edinburgh, but there was...
Well, it was the SNP, subsequently no popery was the other one.
That's it. Yeah, subsequently no popery. Now, this stuff's from the late 60s, the mid-70s.
Yeah.
Where is it? I mean, is this Sleeping Beauty we're talking about here? She'd been asleep as the prince just come along and gave her the kiss. You know, this is just nonsense. But clearly she's in a selection process where she knows where the balance of forces are. And this is her playing directly to that bigotry. The last time I heard this being said was, oddly enough, when Andrew Brophy was the European candidate of the SNP in Glasgow, and we did a hustings with Janie Buchan. And the chair of the hustings was a Catholic priest in Partick, who at one point said, despite the fact that Mr. Brophy is sitting there of, absolutely solid Irish Catholic background, this priest actually said at the end of the meeting that his parishioners should be very careful, because any hint that Scotland should come under absolute control of the Church of Scotland again would be terrible for Catholics. 1989 that was. Come on now. It's 2023. What is going on? This woman is deranged. But as I said, it's about something tighter than that. She doesn't believe this. This is what she thinks she needs to say to get the votes, to get the nomination, because she knows the power that is happening within that constituency. It's just pathetic, Roddy. It's just pathetic.
Absolutely. Eva, this is the choices actually at the moment. I used to, a few years back, say, I feel sorry for the English voters with the choices they've got. At least we've got one party we can all vote for. Actually, we're now in the same boat as England was a few years ago, almost. There is an option. But it narrowing down to think if you get rid of the Tories to get Labour or retain the SNP, it's not a good choice, is it?
Not at all, because if you look at the Scottish political landscape and you survey in particular the needs of the people of Scotland and you think about strategies and the ills of the country, then we need to address poverty and health and education and infrastructure. Scotland will not be able to do that properly as a devolved country. We can only do it with independence. And when you see what's going to happen at Grangemouth if the current SNP government allow Radcliffe to have his way, then we need independence more urgently than ever. And if Grangemouth and what may happen there does not encourage the independence movement to get behind a Scotland United campaign, what the hell ever will? Because you can sit, and every one of us here and most of the people watching know what's wrong in Scotland. It's very simple. It's not rocket science. We do not control our own resources. And because we don't control our own resources, we cannot plan to make our country a better place. We can have a stick and plaster here and there, but at the moment, the patient is hemorrhaging from all different orifices, quite frankly. As I've said so many times before, we need to use our money to create a house building corporation, a national house building corporation, to deal immediately with what is a housing emergency. It's been declared as such, I think, in Edinburgh or Glasgow, both places were talking about it. There is a homeless emergency throughout the country. There are people who are homeless that have a roof over their head, but it's not secure, and there are others sleeping rough. There are 200 to 300 people being fed every night on the streets of Glasgow. That is a national disgrace. Any government worth its salt would address that matter without undue delay. The SNP are failing so to do. We have issues with fuel poverty, food poverty, and rising numbers of food banks in the country. We have problems with hospital waiting lists. The performance within hospitals is poor. In some places, people struggle to get a GP appointment. They struggle to get a dental appointment. People are taking out their own teeth, for goodness sake, in 2023. None of that will be resolved if Scotland votes SNP or Labour or Tory. It will only get worse. Under the Tories, disabled will be required to work from home. If it is deemed that people who are out of work have not made sufficient effort to get work, their benefits will be reduced drastically to the extent where people will die. That's what the Tories have in store. But Labour said that they would go at least as far. These are not politicians. These are not people that have any sense of public service or public duty or any sense of community spirit or any level of understanding that vulnerabilities arise for all different sorts of reasons and that each of us is in jeopardy to a greater or lesser degree. I know from bitter personal experience that you can be earning a 6-figure salary 1 minute and the following week you're in hospital talking about getting your leg hacked off. There but for the grace of God go very many other people, including the Tory cabinet and the Labour shadow cabinet. So I think that if Scotland doesn't waken up now to the prospects of life under the Tories and the Labour Party over the course of the next few years, not only will it be too late for Scotland to redeem itself within a few years, there will be nothing left to redeem because our people will be so absolutely scunnered, our infrastructure shot to hell, and our resources such as Grangemouth, or the materials that we need to process resources and to keep our funds within our country for our own sake will be scorched earth, and this dream will have died forever.
Yeah. Could I just say, folks, from a blog of mine on Friday, I give one of my blogs a wee punt, a lesson in history. It is a plan, and it shows what can be done and what can be done at next year's UK general election, because time's running out, folks. My guests here are telling you, what they're telling you is true. We cannot keep waiting. Unlike what Miss Sturgeon said about a year ago, time is on our side. It's not. We're running out of time. It's not just Grangemouth time's running. It's running out for us all. We need to mobilise. We need to get angry, as our Dr. Yvonne Ridley says so often. We need to get moving. But can I stay with you for a minute, Eva? Because the other big news this week, of course, is that Alex Salmond, the Right Honourable Alex Salmond, has started his court case that so many of us have waited on. And perhaps you could explain to our viewers why it's happening now and exactly what's going on without prejudicing the case in any shape, way, or form.
Right, this is my speculation based on some information that I've read online and some views given by some lawyers who are not involved in the process and some who are. Alex's judicial review against the Scottish Government came to an end in January 2019. There are circumstances where you then have a period of 5 years to proceed with a case. So you'll see the 5th anniversary of that will be January next year. So that may in part explain why this action is revealed to be underway now. But the action is primarily damages to do with misfeasance in public office, where it's alleged that members of the Scottish Government behaved in a fashion that lacked good faith, is probably the most polite way to put it. But as somebody else once said, I would like in due course to have the ability to elaborate at length on my view in relation to some of the evidence. You'll notice I didn't blink too much when I was saying that, and some of the smarter folk here might know who it was that I was slightly misquoting.
Well said. Phil, we've waited for want of a better phrase, to fight back. Knowing the facts, as many of us do, and knowing the personalities and those that are protected and the lies that were being told. Now, I'm led to believe, again, Eva can interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong, but evidence that was prevented from being shown can now come into the public domain. This is a positive sign for our entire movement, I would suggest.
Yeah, as you say, it's the begin. Is this the beginning of the unravelling? Well, we certainly hope so, for the sake of justice, fairness, and the taking back of our politics and making a dent in those who have corrupted our institutions. Because our institutions, there is no doubt about it, have been corrupted, and they need to be taken back for the people. The whole American thing of for the people, by the people. This is what we need. So SNP are now, they're no different from the Tories and Labour, fully compliant with the will of the powers that be, infiltrated, corrupted, and will follow instruction and direction. And that direction is to, on the face of it, support independence, but in reality, actions and words matter, as we see all the time. So compare and contrast the policies and legacy of Alex and Nicola when it comes to this. Why is this court case happening? Because these are two completely different animals. For comparison, look at Wings over Scotland, and this court case will bring it to head. And at the time, I was horrified when I saw what was going on. And we've got some inside information. We'll say no more on that. But this being unravelled and shown to the people of Scotland should do a great deal of positivity towards the deconstruction of the corrupted SNP and getting us back on track to where we need to be heading, which is towards independence, united under a United Scotland United, or whatever vehicle that is, the same as the Yes movement. So see the Reverend's Hollow Crown of March the 27th, and he says, look at what the difference between Salmond. Independent support was 50% when they left office. Sturgeon 47. SNP support 50. Under Sturgeon it was 43. That's at Holyrood. At Westminster it was 46 under Salmond, 39 under Sturgeon. Personal approval ratings plus 35. The membership is 85,000 under Salmond, 72 under Sturgeon. Did we have a majority in Scottish Parliament? Yes, under Salmond. Sturgeon? No, never achieved it. Were we part of the European Union? Yes, under Salmond. No, under Sturgeon. SNP under police criminal investigation? Nope, wasn't the case under Salmond. It certainly is now under Sturgeon. And that's all there is to show for our 8 years. And as he says at the end of his comment, that's the end of it. Next, please. It's a perfect assessment of the facts. And then look at the 8 years of failure. It's absolutely been a toxic bin fire. It really has. What a mess. What a mess we've been facing. And and since she inherited that position when she was given the keys to our country, she could have. I mean, we had 54. We were when we went down to Westminster in 25, that landslide was part of Salmond's legacy, Of the 60
Absolutely.
months before it was 54 of them were Alex's, and she did nothing in the interim to add to it, other than put the crown on and smile and be the big I am. Since she's inherited that golden chalice, she's achieved nothing. 2016, she lost Salmond's majority at Holyrood. 2017, lost 40% of the SNP MPs. 2019, won back just over half of the ones she lost in the 2 years earlier. And in 2021, failed to either regain the SNP's Holyrood majority or increase the vote share, which actually fell. So it barely needs saying that these failures come despite the vastly more favourable circumstances that Sturgeon had, all the resources of wealth at disposal, all this membership, the incompetence of the Tories at the time under May and Johnson, which I watched and I couldn't believe this golden opportunity. And consider Salmond was competing with people like Blair and Brown, you know. Well, compared to and Cameron, of course. And then there's Brexit and the minority government. So what about this action? Eva's nailed it as we knew she would. But well, for me, this is payback for her second greatest betrayal, that of the stitch-up of Alex Salmond. And I will be contributing to this cause. I, for one, will contribute to this cause. It's only right we do correct this despicable injustice, unravel this web of deceit and lies, betraying her mentor and the man that made her political career possible, and that presented her with the greatest opportunity any Scottish politician has ever been given to write herself into the annals of history as the woman who freed Scotland and led us to freedom, was bad enough. But her biggest betrayal for me is that betrayal of the Scottish people. She failed in freeing us from poverty and subservience by turning her back on gaining our freedom and instead looked after herself and her cronies, putting in place idiot policies that were designed to scupper the cause of independence, keeping the pound, stating we go straight back into the EU instead of the entirely sensible and preferable EFTA that we talk about, that option, the GRR, fighting Brexit at Westminster, removal of the key decisions from and the list of failures goes on, absolutely on and on. So for me, Alex Salmond nailed it in one statement. Throughout this tawdry business, I have done my talking in court or in front of Parliament. That has resulted in victory in the Court of Session and being cleared of all charges in the High Court of Justiciary. I intend to continue with that practice, and by God, I wish him every positive a win. I wish him a win. I will support him, and I believe his victory will be the turning point in our fight for our freedom.
Yeah. Of course, in fairness, she didn't mention the baby boxes, but I'm leaving that to Yvonne. I know that's her favourite specialist topic.
Well, it wasn't even her achievement either. She nicked that idea from Scandinavia, didn't she?
The truth I had was that it was Alec that actually had the idea, dispatched the boy Mark MacDonald to find out about it.
Yep.
And he found about it, you're right, from Finland. But it was actually Alec's idea as well, and she rode on in the back of it, which is your greatest achievement. I know, you love it.
Well, but so many people are going to get so much closure from this. You know, everyone that I know in the Alapa party was in the SNP, and many of us are still suffering from some form of PTSD. And this is what happens when there's been a grave injustice, and people don't like to see what happened to Alex Salmond, you know, a great statesman whose reputation was trashed by a load of women called the Alphabeties. And it was nothing short of a disgrace. So not only will Alex get closure from this, thousands of other people will as well, because they don't know what happened to their party, other than it was taken over by a bunch of crooks. And there are still people who are out in the ether, politically homeless, who were in the SNP, who still don't know what happened. And they want to know. And these people will, I think, get a lot of closure from this case. The dignity with which Alex Salmond has faced all of this is nothing short of, it's really admirable, because I think some of us would have handled such an injustice in quite a different way. And this is his way of getting revenge. And it's the correct route, going through the courts. But of course,
I would just say, if I may, Yvonne, I don't think Alex's motive is revenge. I think his motive is justice. I don't think knowing the man is not as great. I mean, I'm not professing to know him, completely and intimately. I've worked for him for a few years. Revenge, I don't think is a thing that motivates him.
Well, I'm very happy to be corrected on that, and you're probably right. But there are lots of us that are still demanding to know what the hell happened. But of course, It's also a treacherous route to get justice, because there are some senior figures in the judiciary who are as bent as a 9-bob note. And, they can't be trusted. And it's a pity it wasn't a ticket affair, because it would be a sellout show. Because a lot of people need to go in there and see and hear and learn what happened to the leader of their party, what happened to their party, who the main players were, who did what to who. And this is a big stain on our nation. And so a lot of people will cheer that we've got something to look forward to in 2020.
Yeah, go out there, folks, and buy your popcorn now to avoid disappointment. I think it's definitely going to be a popcorn thing. Lloyd, again, I'll wait if Eva interrupts me if I go stray here in any way, shape, or form. But it's been insisted, I think is the word, because of the investigations by the police. And everyone's touched on it. I mean, they're trying to find this leak from Sturgeon's office for her head of staff, Liz Lloyd, who was a very, 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 very close friend of David Clegg, the man who printed this document he shouldn't have had. And as I say, he was a very, very close friend of Liz Lloyd's. And why the police have not been able to wrap this up, I do not know. But that's one of the things that's delayed it. We do need our judiciary and police force to get their finger out. This has been hanging about too long. We need closure. The nation needs closure.
Absolutely, Roddy. Our politics will never be clean until this situation is resolved one way or the other. Too many people have got too many questions, and I'm talking here about ordinary people, the electorate, who many of whom bought the story as it was presented by the mainstream media that Alec was guilty. It was all it was a done deal, and many of them were deeply and quite surprised at the fact that he was not guilty, because they didn't know the detail, because the detail was never presented. The defence case was never presented in the mainstream media. So people, the fact that nothing subsequent has happened has led to a confusion for an awful lot of the people of the electorate. It also allowed, the use of the Marmite Salmond kind of attitude. It allowed people to say, oh, well, I never liked him anyway. But until the situation's cleared up, until, for those of us who are politically active and who are knowledgeable, and I don't mean to say other people are not knowledgeable, but there are certain elements about this which only some people know, the majority of people don't know, and that's the central tragedy. But the cleaning of the stables that has to happen as a result of this is going to be monumental. But until it happens, we cannot move forward. We have those who will be implicated entrenched in their position, that they don't want to talk about it. They just, it was like what Ian McWhirter said, everyone else has moved on. I've never read such an anodyne, nonsensical statement. But then again, what would you expect from a Scottish public schoolboy? When it comes right down to it, he knows he's complicit, like many others in the media. And what they don't want is to be exposed as the people who bought the story, sold the story, and convinced themselves that the story was real when they knew that the story was not real. My concern about even discussing this is, if in any way this case is prejudiced, then it's my belief, and I think Phil would probably agree with me, there are elements there are elements within who would love to find that little chink that allows this to be a mistrial. Now, we don't do mistrials in Scotland, but something that can block the procedure. So I would caution everyone, especially on social media, be careful what you say. Let this proceed through the process as Alec wants, and let justice be done that way. It's really important that there is utter and complete clarity here. Our politics are cleaned, and that our democracy comes out of this in a new fashion where all the people can see it's laid before them the way forward for the country.
Indeed. While we're on legal things, I'm back to you with another legal thing. Now, we're not going to get... A lot of people like myself believe that this thing with Alec will eventually lead to karma. And I'm a great believer in karma, Eva. But I also like to take credit for coining the phrase house jocks. But we have a house disc jockey, Kay Adams, who this week, a wee bit of karma come along her way. She's a big die-hard Brit, but she doesn't want to pay her British taxes. And there's a bit of a joint £124,000 tax battle that she's due to pay. Isn't it amazing? Those that profess to love Britain and the UK, but they don't want to pay their taxes either.
If I've got this right, I think she's claiming that she has a corporate interest through which she pays her salary, therefore she would pay any tax at a much reduced rate, rather than being, in essence, PAYE like most people who are employed. So I understand that's the nature of the difficulty.
Sounds like the Rangers defence, and it didn't go very far, did it?
Well, it sounds like what a lot of other celebrities tend to do. Let's see what happens. If she wins her case, fair enough, but I actually hope that she doesn't.
No, I'll just take great pleasure in watching her have to pay up for all these disgusting phone-ins she's had. And if the word gets back to you, I'm laughing at you. Phil, this week as well, I'm afraid you're on the naughty step. Techie, could you stick up Penny Mordaunt's latest outburst, please? I really don't know what I've got to say to you, Phil. If you had done your job properly.
Yes,
she obviously hates the Scots for a reason. And I'm going to have to say, well, it's got to be said, I think it's you. I think you've caused this. Because her hatred for Scots and Scotland is unbelievable. That she could take something like drug consumption rooms and talk about the SNP have screwed things up so badly. All that's happening now is Scottish junkies got somewhere warm to go and take their heroin. It is disgusting.
Yeah, but this is just Penny as a mouthpiece of the union and script
I hope you're not
writers.
trying to defend it here, mate. I just hope you're not going to go down that road.
No, point scoring Penny strikes again. What she says does not make sense. Watch what Portugal and Switzerland did. Again, check out the work of Johan Hari, I've mentioned a few times, the excellent English Swiss journalist, and well worth a watch is his analysis of this on the Joe Rogan podcast. What works, what doesn't work. This has nothing to do with what is right in the treatment of the victims of drug abuse. And let's be clear about this. The victims of drug abuse, they shouldn't be persecuted, they should be helped. We should spend the money instead of prosecuting these people. We should be helping these people, and it comes from poverty. We all understand this. This is point scoring Penny at her usual tricks. And there's an interesting one about the Kay Adams side that a lot of people may not understand. That I'm a wee bit more familiar with Kay Adams and this issue that she faces. There's a lot more to it than people perhaps understand. It's the EBT, and it is, as you say, the Rangers or Employee Benefit Trust scheme, or the Rangers tax case rule in play, where HMRC can go back to 1999 and reassess what they think you owe. Now, they can't retrospectively impose tax change law on the people and impose it, but they can change how they assess it. So what they do is they pull this trick, they go way back, say this is how we've decided this should be assessed. We believe that what you did was wrong and therefore you owe us this. And if you disagree, you take us to court. Now, that's people like Adams have got the money to fight. But what you've got is Kay is high profile and might win because she has this money. But many people affected by this, including nurses, IT professionals, and others, including oil and gas consultants, were caught up in this. It's actually unfair what's been done by HMRC, but most people are not interested in getting into the details. Accountants were selling these schemes, and unless you're an accountant, they're very difficult to understand. There's been many suicides as a result of this, and a campaign at Westminster that many MPs signed up to fight this injustice when it had to be explained to them, because it's a very complex issue. But it's probably a programme all on its very own, very complicated, very specialist, and quite frankly downright boring unless you're involved, because it's ideal for government because they're seen to be doing something about tax avoidance, not evasion, incidentally, the difference being the thickness of a prison cell wall. But yet what they do is they keep the big corporate loopholes open, like the Mayfair tax loophole. I spoke about this at Westminster. So the so-called Mayfair tax loophole is part of the capital gains system, right? And it was agreed by the Labour government, red Tories, more proof if you ever wanted it. It allows private equity firms to treat their profits as capital gains when there's capital at risk. And this is what Kay is going through, and lots of these consultants went through, and what the HM are saying is, no, you're actually an employee. Well, you don't have the benefits. I don't get sick pay. I don't get whatever. So there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. It's very, very dull, but I'm afraid she does have a point here, as much as I don't like to admit it.
But when you were saying it's very dull, I thought you were going to lighten up when you said what some people don't know about Kay. I thought, oh, not Kay as well. Surely not, Phil. I thought you were going to release another bit of information. But you're quite right. It was unfair to Rangers. Terrible, terrible thing. Injustice. But on a serious note, this week as well, Yvonne, South Africa, who led this, but were supported by Bolivia, Bangladesh, Djibouti, and other countries, have gone to the International Criminal Court to have a warrant issued for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes and crimes against humanity. They think as early as December a warrant could be issued. But will it? What's the chances of ever coming to anything, Yvonne?
It's difficult to know, because I think it would be fair to say about 70% of the world is supporting Palestinians, but the leaders aren't, with the exception of a few countries, and South Africa is one of them. South Africa knows the pain of apartheid, and
it sure does.
And of course, Israel is an apartheid state. It was a label given by Carter in the White House, Jimmy Carter. It's a label that's been given by the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Amnesty, and Human Rights Watch. You know, it's indisputable now. And it would be good to see this happen, but I have a feeling that Netanyahu couldn't give a stuff. If it means that he'll just have to cut down on his air miles, then he probably will. But he's finished now as a politician. An overwhelming amount of Israelis want to see the back of him. They don't like the way that events unfolded after October the 7th. They hold him responsible for the events on October the 7th. And but somewhere along the line, somebody will end up in court. Possibly me, because I've become a tax rebel. And if you go onto a website called probityco.com, it tells you how to set up a trust fund, pay your taxes into this trust fund, and then you tell the Inland Revenue, you want my taxes, it's in this trust fund, just promise me that the British government will no longer support war and war criminals, because I don't want to break the law.
Becky, could you run that across the bottom of the show there? Probity.co.com. Was it .com?
Propertyco.com. And it's basically, the website argues very well, although Eva should probably cast her legal eye over it. The website argues that if we pay our taxes, we are breaking the law, because in 1918, there was a treaty signed called the Paris Treaty, or the Kellogg-Briand Treaty, which made war illegal. And Britain was a signatory, so was America, so was France, that they pledged in this treaty, which is still valid today, that war is illegal. Well, I'm an honest citizen. I don't want to break the law, so I'm withholding my taxes. I'll pay them as long as the government signs these assurances as set out in this trust that I'm setting up. And if they don't touch the taxes for a year, then I'm entitled to just take it back.
It sounds too good to be true.
As a law-abiding citizen. So,
well, as they say, Yvonne, it sounds too good to be true. It usually is. But, you know, the Treaty of Union's been broken so many times as well. So I don't know about this other treaty. So we'll have to see. But I wish you well. And don't you worry, if you're in jail, we'll send you best wishes, a cake with a file on it, and we'll keep your seat warm till you come back. Don't worry about it.
It's based on the same principle as the rent strike by the Glasgow women of 1915.
Mary, what was her name again? I've forgotten. Mary, that's terrible.
Yes.
Come on.
Mary Garner.
Forgotten. Before we finish, Lloyd, we're coming to the end. We've overshot our runway. And Derek, if you're watching, mate, honestly, you know, I can only run it for so long, mate. The ceasefire's on just now, and us, peaceniks and people who are supporting the Palestinians and supporting the end to this war, can this ceasefire hold? And is there any chance, do you think, Lloyd, that we can get a just settlement out of this and a fair peace?
The ceasefire can hold, but pound to a penny, the Israelis will find a way to break it as early as they possibly can. They've done it in every single conflict that in my lifetime that Israel has been involved in. There's been a declared ceasefire at some point, and they were the ones who broke it, or used bad actors like the South Lebanese army, the fascist army that worked alongside the Israelis in the 1981 invasion of Lebanon. They used them to break the ceasefire. Roddy, I'm repeating myself here. We have to take the positives. We have to hope. It's all we've got. And it's all the people of Palestine have got either, is hope and resistance. We have to hope that the best comes from this. But, you know, for my many years on the planet, not far away from the length of time Israel's existed, you know, that hope gets crushed and pushed into the ground on a regular basis. But the issue of the International Criminal Court is very interesting for us as a country, and I mean Scotland, because we have a separate judicial code, as you know. We have a separate legal system. And in the early 2000s, a Belgian court issued an arrest warrant, not a European arrest warrant, an international arrest warrant for an Israeli major general who was coming to speak at the Jewish National Fund dinner in Glasgow. And he refused to get off the plane at Glasgow Airport until he was given an absolute assurance by a sheriff in Glasgow and by, at that time, Strathclyde Police, that he would not be arrested, because there was a lawyer in Glasgow who had a copy of the warrant and was seeking to have this particular individual arrested on it, and it was on a crimes against humanity, a war crime accusation, which would have led him to be arrested and then shipped immediately to The Hague. The Israelis fear this stuff. They really do fear it. They moved heaven and earth to get the Belgians to overturn that court judgment. But if an ICC judgment comes and then is served in Scotland against any Israeli who's complicit in the genocide in Palestine at the moment, then we could play our part. Maybe we don't have to have the flag between Saudi Arabia and Senegal outside the United Nations. Maybe our independent judiciary could actually take on this case and show us as a beacon for the world. So that's my hope, Roddy, and it's going to be hope.
We can. We hope we must. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. The clock has beaten us. And thank you for your input. And thank you again for your wisdom. And as many of our viewers say, the sanity you bring to things. And you, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed talking to my dear friends here. And until we see you again, please, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.